I have something here that I absolutely, still smells the same. I loved this stuff when I was a kid. You know what this is? Play-Doh. Play-Doh is wonderful stuff, and you can make all kinds of things. What's that? Can you smell it? It's kind of like crayons. It has a very distinctive and good childhood smell. Okay? With Play-Doh, you can make a snowman. Okay? Will it look like Olaf? There. See? There's a snowman. Or, actually, Laura, can you come on up here, please? I didn't tell you you were going to do this because she would probably run. This lady has very, very special, very special hands. Okay? I want you to look at those hands. Wow. And with those hands, she can do magic. There you go, yeah, that's what I was, a pinch pot? Way back. You guys can make pinch pots too. Yeah. And you can put things in the bowl. Yeah. Change. Or your breakfast cereal. Jelly beans, that would be good. This lady, this wonderful lady, for years and years, has been making our communion stuff for us. In fact, Linda and I have a bowl that we got as a wedding gift. Wow, like a gazillion years ago. And it's the same because I think the Pettingers, gave it to us as a wedding gift way back when. Laura has made new communion stuff for us. And it's all up here. So I want you to look at this. See? The hands that made this out of clay and glaze and a lot of patience. And wherever you see the little black dots, that's a little bit of Mount St. Helens in the glaze. Isn't that cool? Okay. So I want you guys to come on up. And Laura, come over here, please. And I just want you to hold this. And guys, come on up. Everybody get close. And everybody kind of touch the cup. Because we're going to bless these. Remember, there's hand sanitizer. Okay, but we're not using this cup. Okay, just go ahead and touch it down. Yeah, she washed that too. Okay? And let's have a prayer of blessing to bless all of these wonderful things that Laura has made for us to use. And we'll probably be using them 30 or 40 years from now. That's really cool. Okay? Can you bow your heads with me in prayer? Loving God, you have gifted us with this very special lady, Laura, who has a special talent, a gift, that she can take clay and put it on a potter's wheel. And for us, it's like magic, the things that she creates. We know that it takes a lot of work, a lot of patience, some sweat, and sometimes some tears to be able to put all these things together. But this is a very, very special gift given to us so that we can hold your presence in this cup, on these plates, that we can come together as a community and celebrate being one in you as we gather for years and years around these special, special gifts. God bless Laura and her hands, and God bless all of these things that she's given us to your glory and in your name. Amen. Yeah. Now, Laura, can you fire this? Won't work? really special. Okay, our story.
Our reading today comes from Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. When he returned to Capernaum after some days, it was reported that he was at home. So many gathered around that there was no longer room for them, not even in front of the door, and he was speaking the word to them. Then some people came, bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. And when they could not bring him to Jesus because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him. And after having dug through it, they let down the mat on which the paralytic lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the scribes were sitting there questioning in their hearts, "Why does this fellow speak in this way? It is blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" At once Jesus perceived in his spirit that they were discussing these questions among themselves. And he said to them, "Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Stand up and take your mat and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the paralytic, "I say to you, stand up, take your mat, and go to your home." And he stood up and immediately took the mat and went out before all of them, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." Jesus went out again beside the sea. The whole crowd gathered around him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the scribes and the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak. Otherwise, the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is lost, and so are the skins. But one puts new wine into fresh wineskins." Word of God, word of life.
Thanks be to God.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, amen. Such an amazing story that we have at the beginning of our gospel story for today. A story that gets repeated in all 3. Oh, Carol, yay! I didn't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Carol is one of our 3 kings, and so she's been one that I've been kind of looking out for to make sure. Anyway, a story that I even remember as a kid, because it's one that one of our Sunday school teachers, when I was like in the 2nd grade, decided that we should act out. And I was one of these kids that kind of like Mary now, where like the helium hand, right? Yeah, automatically volunteering for everything. And so I volunteered to be the paralytic guy. Which, I mean, my mouth could work, and so I was doing fine. But I was supposed to lay down, and the teacher had this mat, and I didn't realize how incredibly terrifying acting that out was going to be. Because I sat down or laid down on this cot, and then she had 4 adult helpers who were then going to lower, and I was tied to the cot, and they had me up like 10 feet above all the rest of the Sunday school kids, and they were going to lower me down into the, and I have to tell you, I was up at the top of this kind of wall, and they were going to lower me down and I'm tied, and it was just like absolute and utter panic. And like I said, my mouth was still working great, so I was screaming. And I suddenly realized I had to trust. See, it's kind of like one of those trust fall sorts of things. I had to trust the people who were lowering me down. And I had to trust the people who were catching me at the other end. Sometimes we hear these stories and we don't realize the dynamics of what's going on. That here's a man who is paralytic, and we don't know whether it's from life or whether it's just been for a couple of weeks, but we know this guy is in real trouble. And he has 4 really good friends. 4 friends who are not going to let anything at all get in the way of trying to help this guy out. They hear that Jesus can heal people. And so they grab the corners of his bed and they carry him. But then when they get to Jesus' house, by the way, it's an interesting little, how many people ever thought, Jesus has a house? When it's talking in this lesson, it says, Jesus was at home. Well, in the Greek, it really means Jesus was at his house. But anyway, they come to Jesus' house, and everybody else in the village has heard that Jesus is there too. And he's kind of this local rock star sort of guy. And so they're all crowded around. And there they are with the bed, with the guy strapped to it. And they realize that they're not going to be able to get in. Maybe they did ask beforehand, can you guys, and there's just no way of getting through this barrier, this wall of people that were keeping them. So, being really, really good friends and being ingenious, they realized that one of the ways that they could get in was really unorthodox, but they were going to do it. Anything to get this guy to Jesus. And so, they had Flintstone kind of houses, big block houses back then. And the roof was a place where you would go in the summertime to kind of go and cool off. And they'd have a little stairway alongside. And then most of the houses were made out of adobe, out of mud, baked mud. And so these guys take the guy around, up the stairs, and they actually dig through the roof to be able to lower, and there's that moment as they lower the guy down in front of Jesus. Now Jesus looks at what's going on, and Jesus, in our language, in our lingo, Jesus would probably be going, yeah, you guys, you're so cool. Look at the faith of these 4 men. Look at the friendship and the love that they have, that they're willing to go through anything to get this guy here for healing. Now back in Jesus' time, they thought that the sins of a person caused illness. And so it's not a big surprise when Jesus says, son, your sins are forgiven you. But immediately, the good church-going people who are there, because that's the way you have to see the scribes and the Pharisees, the good church-going people who are there are going, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a second. You've crossed the line. Jesus, we're here because we think you're cool, but only God can forgive sins. And Jesus, see, a lot of times we don't get the emotion. A lot of times in the Gospel of Mark, and they kind of ease it. Matthew and Luke kind of don't like it. But in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is always making, it's a Greek word, the sound of a horse. We don't have a word like that. We have neigh. But this is more the sound of, I want you all to do that. Don't spit too much on the neighbors around you, but kind of do that. Jesus is constantly being confronted by these people who are really trying to rain on the parade. And his immediate reaction is, which is easier? Some people are liking that too much. Which is easier? For me to tell this person your sins are forgiven you, or to say, hey, paralyzed man, get up. And they continue to argue. Jesus heals the man. but he doesn't heal them. Because as the story continues, they've still got that problem. I want us to look at this story, and rather than getting fixated on the miracle itself, which is wonderful, what I want you to think about are the barriers. Because the barriers continue, the walls continue, the obstacles continue. It starts out with the obstacle of the crowd. Then it moves into the obstacle of the house itself. Then it moves into the obstacle of how do we get him through the roof. But then, when they are face to face with Jesus, new obstacles start to arise. And these become the obstacles of attitude. And that's the obstacle that will continue all the way through. Because then Jesus leaves that house and he goes and he sees Levi, Matthew, the tax collector. A lot of us don't realize how despicable tax collectors were seen within Jesus' world. And what do the good church people do again? Oh, ick, Jesus, come to dinner at our house. We'll make a nice casserole. Why are you eating dinner with this guy and his friends? I was trying to think of somebody that would be within even our own society as being that much of a pariah. And it's really, who would shock you if Jesus were to come and to be with us and take like the one or two people or the part of our community that we considered, now maybe we aren't quite, but I was reading one commentary where it would be like Jesus found the drug dealer in town. And recognize Jesus is not, because immediately all the other Lutheran pastors said, oh, does that mean that Jesus is condoning drug dealing? It's like, oh, for heaven's sakes, you guys are as bad as the Pharisees, right? Because Jesus doesn't condone the tax collecting, but what he does is he sees a human being and he reaches out to that guy and says, Matthew, I want to come to your house. And Matthew's friends are just blown away. And they join him. But there are still barriers. Still barriers. The Pharisees are still there going, why is he eating dinner with these people? And Jesus turns to them and he says, listen. I didn't come to make you sanctimonious and pious. I didn't come so that you could separate yourself out from other people and think, oh, what a good person I am. I am not like these others. Jesus said, I came to really reach in, to really deeply reach in, not just to your society, but into your life too. And for you to start to recognize the barriers that you've created, the ones that you don't even think about necessarily because they become so much a part of your life, the barriers that you've created that keep you from reaching out and fully living out this world, this kingdom, this way that the world should be structured, that God had created, this world where each person is valued not because of what they do or what they have done, but instead, and not because of some self-appointed idea of what is holy or not holy, but they are reached out to and we connect with them simply because they are also children of God. We are so good at still creating barriers. Are you Lutheran? I could say, are you Christian? What kind of Christian? Are you a Presbyterian, a Methodist, a Roman Catholic? And see how those can become barriers. Are you a Lutheran? What kind of Lutheran? Are you an ELCA Lutheran? Or are you Missouri Synod Lutheran? And you see, even there, we can start making little jokes about that, right? And what are we doing? We're making barriers. We do it without even thinking about it. The university, our systems, create barriers. Are you a student, a professor? Are you a doctor? Do you have PhD behind your name? All those things, in and of themselves, not bad, but what can they do? They can start to create barriers, walls. And Jesus said, those who think they are well, that's the key part of this. Those who think they have no need for a physician. I've not come for those, said Jesus. I've come for people who can be honest enough to say, you know what? I may put on a good facade, but I have brokenness within me. And there are things that I do in my life that spread that brokenness. And Jesus said, I have come for those who have the honesty to know that they need healing. During this time, especially, I think, this time for us as Christians, are we the hands of Jesus? Are we the hands of healing? Hands reaching out? Or are we continuing the grand old tradition of being Pharisees? No real answer for you. But I want you to think about it as we go about the work of being the church. Are we being physical hands of Christ reaching out? Or what are the ways that we are making obstacles and walls where somebody may have to rip the roof off of this church to be able to get in? I remember so clearly when Carl was little once. And when he was about 6, 7 years old, we took him out trick-or-treating. And we went to this one house, and there was no clear way. You remember being there? There was no clear way. There was no front door to this house. There were fences and walls, and Carl, I could see him kind of wandering around and kind of going in and out. And then finally he came back to the car, and he was totally in a snit. Can't imagine that at all. And I remember him standing outside the window, and I rolled the window down to the car, and he said, "Dad, don't they want to give out candy?" Well, they may have been behind those walls, wondering why nobody could get in. And there was Carl, with hands wide open. We need to think about those questions honestly, sometimes in a hard way, for ourselves.